The biting wind, a phantom hand, worried the collar of my threadbare coat. It carried the scent of diesel and distant, restless water, an acrid perfume that had become the backdrop to my hollow existence. I stood by the flickering yellow of a halogen lamp, a sentinel of sorts, at the border crossing checkpoint at 2 a.m. The air was a sharp, clear canvas for the sparse sounds, the low thrum of idling engines, the occasional bark of a guard dog, the rustle of official papers in the gloved hand of a passing officer. This was my sanctuary, or perhaps my purgatory, a place of constant flux where every face was new and no one asked too many questions. My breath plumed, a transient ghost in the frigid night. I watched a long-haul truck lumber through the inspection bay, its massive tires crunching on the gravel. Each beam of light, each shadow cast by the concrete barriers, felt like a deliberate smear on a canvas I no longer wished to paint. My days, once sharp and purposeful, had dulled to a monotonous gray, a consequence of the stain that clung to my name like river silt. The weight of that past, a leaden cloak, was a constant companion, whispering of a case that had unraveled not just a crime, but my very life. The phantom scent of that old fire, the metallic tang of despair, sometimes still caught in my throat, a bitter aftertaste to every waking moment. A tinny squawk from the portable radio clipped to my belt shattered the fragile quiet. It was a standard news bulletin, usually ignored, a background hum to the passage of contraband and weary travelers. But then a name, sharp and unexpected, pierced the drone. Elias Thorne, the announcer's voice crackled, laced with an almost reverent shock. The visionary CEO of Omnicorp, found dead early this morning. Parent homicide. Elias Thorne. The name was a monolith in the city's skyline, synonymous with innovation, wealth, and a certain untouchable aura. Omnicorp's headquarters, a glass leviathan, dominated the financial district, a testament to his digital empire. A man like that didn't just die. He was a force, a carefully curated legend. My initial reaction was a familiar, cynical shrug. Another titan fallen, another ripple in the stagnant pond of the powerful. But then, a subtle tremor, a forgotten tremor, ran through me. It was the pull of the intricate, the lure of the broken pieces that demanded to be reassembled. A dangerous, familiar itch. I remembered the faces of the jurors, their eyes like cold stones. I remembered the judge's gavel, a final, crushing blow. My badge, once a beacon, had been tarnished, then ripped away, leaving only the phantom weight against my chest. The thought of stepping back into the glare, into the intricate dance of lies and power, was repellent, yet the name Elias Thorne echoed with an unsettling resonance. The radio crackled again, a different voice this time, one I hadn't heard in years. "User RH, you there? Pick up, damn it." The voice belonged to a former colleague, a captain now, whose ascent had been concurrent with my own dramatic plummet. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the transmit button. Don't know why I even bothered, but, "Look, it's Thorne. This isn't just a mugging gone wrong. Scene, it's clean, too clean, and the political fallout is already starting to boil." His voice was tight, strained, devoid of the usual bravado. "We need eyes, user RH, different eyes, ones that see what others miss because they're too busy looking for what they expect to find." "I remember why I'm not looking for anything anymore, Captain," I replied, the words tasting like ash. "My vision is compromised. Don't give me that self-pitying garbage. My vision was always sharper than anyone's. That's why I got burned. This feels like something from my old cases, the kind that twists and turns until I don't know which end is up." There was a pause heavy with unspoken history. "Just meet me. Abandoned factory, old industrial district. I know the one, midnight, don't be late." He didn't wait for my answer, the line going dead with a hiss of static. The captain knew my habits, knew my weaknesses. He knew the pull that a truly tangled knot had on me, like a moth to a dangerous flame. I stared out at the desolate landscape of the border crossing checkpoint at 2 a.m., the relentless cycle of arrivals and departures. I could remain here, a ghost among the living, or I could step back into the maelstrom. The easy choice was to stay, to let the world burn without me. But the image of Elias Thorne, the untouchable mogul, laid low by an unseen hand, gnawed at something deep within. A flicker of the old fire, a spark I thought long extinguished, began to glow. It wasn't about redemption, not yet. It was about the puzzle, the intricate, deadly puzzle that had just landed on my doorstep, daring me to solve it. My shoulders straightened, a fractional shift. The wind still bit, but it no longer felt like a judgment. It felt like a challenge. The captain's voice, a gravelly echo of a life spent sifting through the city's dregs, had evaporated into the vast, indifferent silence of the border-crossing checkpoint at 2 a.m. I stood there, the chill wind a physical manifestation of the emptiness that had become my constant companion. The desolate landscape stretched before me, a canvas of monochrome under the harsh, utilitarian glow of the floodlights. My breath plumed, a fleeting ghost in the frigid air, mirroring the phantom grip of the past. He knew, the old fox, how to bait the hook. He knew the peculiar itch that a truly tangled knot of malice and mystery scratched within me, a dangerous allure I had long sworn off. Thorne. The name itself was a chime of power and progress, a titan of the digital age, now reduced to a headline, murder. The word felt too blunt, too crude for a man who had built empires from algorithms. My jaw tightened. It wasn't my fight anymore, not officially. A sigh, ragged and unwilling, escaped me. The engine of my battered sedan coughed to life, its protest a mirror of my own. The city, a distant shimmer of false promise on the horizon, beckoned. I gripped the steering wheel, the worn leather familiar beneath my fingers, a small anchor in the swirling current of my reluctance. This wasn't about redemption, I told myself, not truly. It was about the puzzle, the intricate dance of lies and truth, a language I understood better than any other. Here, it was the hushed reverence of tragedy, the nervous energy of officialdom. Uniformed officers moved with practiced solemnity, their flashlights carving arcs through the lingering gloom. Crime scene tape, a vibrant yellow against the slate-gray facade, fluttered like a warning flag. I bypassed the initial cordon, the captain's name, delivered with a curt nod to a surprised patrol officer, acting as my temporary pass. Inside, the penthouse apartment was an unsettling tableau of opulence and violation. A lead detective, a stocky man with weary eyes and a perpetually furrowed brow, spotted me. "User RH," he grunted, his voice laced with an unmistakable blend of suspicion and begrudging respect. "Didn't think I'd show. The captain has a persuasive way about him," I replied, my gaze already sweeping the room, ignoring the detective's barely concealed irritation. "What have I got?" "Thorne. He was found by his assistant this morning. Looks like a robbery gone bad," the detective explained, gesturing vaguely towards a ransacked study. "Forced entry through the service entrance. Valuables tossed, some missing. Stab wound to the chest. Clean, professional." My eyes narrowed. Professional, or staged to look professional? I murmured, more to myself than to him. The detective's jaw tightened. "We're following procedure, user RH. Don't need my cynical brand of guesswork mucking up the scene." I ignored him, my attention fixed on the ornate mahogany desk. Papers were scattered, drawers pulled open, a laptop lay on the floor, its screen shattered. The chaos was deliberate, almost theatrical. My gaze drifted to the service entrance the detective had mentioned. The heavy steel door showed signs of forced entry, a jagged tear in the frame where a pry bar had presumably done its work. But the edges of the tear were too clean, too precise, almost like a stencil. A common thief, panicked and crude, would have left a messier signature. This felt artful. "Anything missing besides the usual jewelry and cash?" I asked, my voice low. "Preliminary inventory is still underway," a forensic technician mumbled from behind a camera, not looking up. "But a few high-value items, yes. Some art pieces, a rare watch." I walked slowly, my senses alight, absorbing the details. The faint scent of ozone hung in the air, oddly out of place in a home that smelled of polished wood and expensive leather. It was almost imperceptible, hidden beneath the metallic tang of blood and the sterile notes of disinfectant. I knelt by the shattered laptop, not touching it, but examining the floor around it. Yet near the edge of a particularly ornate rug, almost swallowed by its intricate pattern, I saw it. It wasn't a footprint, or a drop of blood, or even a fiber. It was a minuscule, almost invisible speck, no larger than a grain of sand, glinting faintly under the beam of my penlight. It was a shard of something crystalline, with an almost iridescent quality, lodged deep within the carpet fibers. It had no place here, amidst the dust of a high-rise, the remnants of a struggle, or the detritus of a robbery. It didn't look like glass or plastic or anything organic. It was alien, a misplaced star in a dark sky. My breath hitched. This wasn't a random break-in. This wasn't a robbery gone bad. This was something else entirely. The captain had called it a tangled knot. I was beginning to see the first, almost invisible thread. It was a detail that screamed a different story, a story where Thorne wasn't just a victim, but a target. And the game, I realized with a familiar, unwelcome jolt, had just begun. The faint ozone scent, subtle as a whisper yet persistent, clung to my memory long after I'd left the opulent confines of the CEO's study. It wasn't the clean, post-storm tang. This was sharper, almost metallic, a ghost of high voltage or something far stranger. Kneeling by the slain executive, my fingers had brushed against a sliver of polished obsidian, not glass, but a synthetic composite, embedded deep within the plush carpet. It pulsed with an almost imperceptible warmth, a residue of the strange energy that permeated the room. This wasn't a stray fragment. It was a component, bespoke and alien in its perfection, humming a silent frequency that only I seemed to perceive. My contact, the weary detective who'd reluctantly granted me access, had dismissed it as debris, another shard of the shattered life. But I knew better. This obsidian fragment, no larger than my thumbnail, was a signature, a calling card of the advanced. Proprietary tech Thorne's company, Nexus Dynamics, was famed for. It hummed with the silent promise of answers. The following morning, the city's concrete canyons seemed to press in, the perpetual hum of traffic a dull throb against my temples. My small office, a sanctuary of dust and forgotten files, felt too quiet. I called the detective, my voice a low rasp. That fragment I found. Have my people run it through forensics, specifically for proprietary materials. Energy residue, focus on Nexus Dynamics patents. There was a beat of hesitant silence on the line, a sigh of resignation. User RH, don't go chasing ghosts. This is out of my depth. His words were a warning, a dismissal, and an unspoken challenge. I ignored them all. Nexus Dynamics was a titan, its roots reaching deep into the city's infrastructure, its branches touching every aspect of modern life. Thorne, its visionary founder, had been lauded for his breakthroughs in neural networking and secure data transfer. But beneath the polished surface, I found fissures. Mentions of Project Morpheus surfaced in obscure forums, linked to hushed conversations among former employees. My contact, perhaps swayed by my insistence or a flicker of his own professional curiosity, eventually provided a backdoor. Not physical access, but a temporary digital key. A ghost in the machine that allowed me to slip past Nexus Dynamics' formidable firewalls. The network hummed with controlled power, a labyrinth of encrypted pathways. I navigated the digital corridors, the glow of my monitor reflecting in my eyes, a silent hunter in a landscape of data. I found it buried deep, in a secure partition labeled Morpheus Alpha. Thousands of files, all heavily encrypted, but the metadata alone was telling. Escalating security protocols, truncated communication logs between Thorne and an unknown director, and a series of emergency protocols triggered just days before Thorne's demise. The sheer volume of data suggested a project of immense scale and profound secrecy. One particular file, despite its encryption, bore a unique identifier, a sequence of numbers and symbols that resonated with the frequency I'd felt from the obsidian fragment. This wasn't just data, it was a blueprint, a key, and then a breakthrough, a small unencrypted memo hastily drafted concerning a mid-level systems engineer. The memo cited unauthorized access attempts and compromised data integrity related to Project Morpheus. It ended with a directive, immediate termination of access and relocation pending review. The date was yesterday. Relocation. Someone was trying to flee. The engineer, a man named Kale, according to the internal directory, had recently requested an emergency leave, citing a family crisis across the border. The timing was too perfect, too convenient. He was the loose thread, the potential leak, or perhaps the next victim. A frantic search through public transit manifests and border crossing logs yielded a hit. Kale had booked a late-night bus, destination across the national line. The bus was scheduled to pass through the main border crossing checkpoint at 2 a.m. The drive was a blur of highway lights and the rhythmic thrum of my engine. My old sedan ate up the miles, the city lights shrinking in my rearview mirror until only the desolate stretch of road remained. The bus, a hulking beast of chrome and tinted glass, pulled up to the inspection bay. Passengers disembarked, shuffling towards the small building for processing. My gaze swept over them, searching for Kale, for the tremor of fear or the furtive glance that would betray him. Then I saw it, Not Kale, but a different kind of signal. A black sedan, too clean, too polished for this desolate stretch of road, parked 100 yards back, its engine off, its windows tinted opaque. It hadn't been there when I arrived. A subtle shift in the air, a prickle on my skin, told me I was not alone in my vigil. My breath hitched. As Kale, a thin, nervous man with a backpack slung over one shoulder, presented his passport, a figure emerged from the black sedan. Tall, unhurried, a silhouette against the checkpoint lights. He moved with a predatory grace, a quiet menace. He wasn't looking at Kale. His eyes, even from this distance, felt like they were fixed on me. A silent, potent message. I saw Kale flinch, his eyes darting towards the figure. His hand trembled as he clutched his passport. The customs agent, oblivious, waved him through. Kale started towards the waiting area, but before he could disappear, the figure from the sedan made a small, almost imperceptible gesture. Kale froze. A silent plea, a desperate warning. Then a sudden, blinding flash from behind the black sedan. Not a camera, but something more intense. A concentrated burst of light that made the air crackle, echoing the ozone scent from Thorne's study. When my vision cleared, Kale was gone. The customs agent looked confused, glancing around, but the other passengers continued their slow shuffle. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, gripped tight. They weren't just after Kale, they knew I was here. This wasn't a simple murder, it was a hunt, and I had just become one of the prey. The game had just escalated, and the unseen adversary had just revealed its teeth. The phantom ozone, a metallic tang on my tongue, became a compass point in the swirling chaos of my mind. It wasn't just a smell, it was a signature, an unseen fingerprint left by a specific kind of violence. My internal archives, scarred by years of chasing shadows, began to cross-reference, sifting through forgotten reports of specialized equipment, fringe technologies, and the rare, almost mythical instances of their deployment. High voltage, yes, but more, a directed pulse, leaving its ghostly trace. My inquiries began as whispers in the digital dark, then escalated to a more aggressive prodding of old, brittle contacts. One such contact, a former colleague now navigating the murky waters of corporate forensics, owed me a favor, a large one. I fed them the specifics, the peculiar residue, the precise, almost surgical nature of the CEO's demise, the absence of forced entry, and that infernal ozone. Days blurred into nights, fueled by bitter coffee and the gnawing certainty that I was dancing on the edge of a precipice. The answer, when it finally arrived, came coded and clipped, a single name attached to a patent for a high-frequency acoustic disruptor, a device capable of incapacitating without leaving a mark, save for that subtle, telltale scent. The patent holder was a brilliant, eccentric engineer, once lauded in the tech world, now largely forgotten, rumored to be designing bespoke security systems for the ultra-wealthy. My gut tightened. Digging deeper into the engineer's recent activities, a pattern emerged. A sudden clandestine sale of intellectual property, a series of cash withdrawals, and then the most damning clue, a flight manifest. Not a flight, but a reservation for a cross-border passage, booked under a false name for the following morning. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. The individual was fleeing. The drive was a blur of highway lights and the rhythmic hum of my aging sedan. My mind, usually a storm of doubts, was a singular, sharp blade honed by the chase. A few trucks idled, their engines rumbling like caged beasts awaiting inspection. My target, a slight figure with hunched shoulders and a nervous energy, was already there, attempting to blend into the sparse queue of vehicles. The engineer, sensing me before seeing me, flinched, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and resignation. "Going somewhere then?" I asked, my voice low, cutting through the engine noise. The individual swallowed hard, a tremor running through their frame. I don't know what I read talking about. The CEO, I pressed, stepping closer, my gaze unyielding. The ozone scent, the way the study looked. I was there, weren't I, with my little disruptor. Their facade crumbled. A ragged breath escaped and the engineer's shoulders slumped. It wasn't supposed to. I didn't mean to. The words spilled out, a flood of confession, detailing the entry, the deployment of the device, the CEO's sudden collapse, the panic, the escape. They painted a picture of a botched assassination, an accidental death during an attempted corporate espionage mission to steal proprietary data. For a fleeting moment, a grim satisfaction settled over me. The pieces fit. The puzzle, brutal as it was, seemed complete. The truth, however ugly, was laid bare. I almost allowed myself to believe it. Then a detail snagged me. The engineer described the CEO falling, striking their head on the ornate fireplace mantel. But I remembered the shattered crystal decanter, flung across the room, its shards glittering like malevolent stars. It suggested a struggle, a violent outburst, not just a quiet collapse. It was a small discrepancy, almost insignificant, but it gnawed at me. A splinter of doubt in the edifice of a clear confession. It wasn't a gunshot, but something harder, more resonant, like a whip. A muffled choke, a desperate struggle, and then with a horrifying efficiency, the individual was dragged backward, swallowed by the night. It happened in an instant, too quick for me to react, too seamless to leave a trace. My breath caught. The confession was a calculated performance, a neatly packaged lie. The engineer was a pawn, deployed and then discarded. Their testimony, a carefully constructed misdirection designed to give me a tidy killer and a convenient motive. The air around me seemed to thicken, suddenly heavy with unseen eyes. I was no longer chasing a killer, I was being hunted, played like a marionette. This wasn't corporate espionage, this was a political maneuver, a grand deception orchestrated by hands far more powerful and ruthless than I had imagined. They were architects of chaos. The same insidious feeling of being outmaneuvered, of the true enemy remaining cloaked in power, untouchable. I had been so close, so terribly close, only to find myself further from the truth than ever before. The game had just begun and I was already losing. The engineer's ragged confession still echoed in the stale air of the interrogation room, a symphony of terror and regret. It wasn't supposed to. I didn't mean to. The device, the deployment, Thorne's sudden collapse. My mind, usually a fortress of cynicism, felt like a sieve, straining to hold the flood of information. I had seen panic before, heard 1,000 desperate pleas, but the engineer's words carried a resonance that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't just a device. It was a key, unlocking a door I had thought permanently sealed. I left the precinct without a backward glance, the detective's parting words about official channels and due process fading into the hum of the city. Official channels had long since become a labyrinth of dead ends for me. The engineer's description of the device, small, emitting a focused electromagnetic pulse designed to induce cardiac arrest, twisted a familiar knot in my gut. I had seen its precursor, or something terrifyingly similar, a decade ago. A ghost of a memory, a flicker of a forgotten file, a name whispered in the shadows of my disgraced past. My office, usually a sanctuary of controlled chaos, felt like a pressure cooker. I pulled up archived reports, dusty digital files from my old life, searching for patterns, for a signature. The old contact, the one who had reluctantly drawn me into this, had provided me with Thorne's personal drive, a digital mausoleum of his life's work. I plunged into it, bypassing layers of encryption with practiced ease, my fingers dancing across the keyboard. Project Chimera. The name pulsed on the screen. A red beacon in the digital night. Thorne's project wasn't merely about a single device. It was a network, a methodology. Hours bled into one another, the glow of the monitor painting my face in stark relief. Then a code. A unique string of alphanumeric characters embedded deep within Chimera's schematics. My breath hitched. I knew that code, not from a file, not from a report, but from a scar etched deep into my psyche. It was the same proprietary identifier I'd found in the wreckage of the case that had shattered my career, the case where a prominent senator's aide had died under eerily similar circumstances, ruled a heart attack. The device, Project Chimera, it wasn't new. It had merely evolved. And Thorne, the beloved tech CEO, was just another victim in their twisted game. The stakes, already high, now felt impossibly personal. The revelation hammered home a truth I had long suppressed. I was not chasing a random killer. I was chasing the architects of my own ruin. My phone buzzed, a call from the old contact. I let it ring, the sound a dull throb against the rising tide of my resolve. There was no going back to their rules, their channels. This was mine now. A flicker of movement caught my eye through the grimy office window. I'd seen it before, a ghost in my periphery. They knew. They were watching. I was going rogue. No more relying on favors, no more playing by rules that had been rigged against me from the start. I packed a small bag, a burner phone, my old service pistol, its weight a familiar comfort against my hip. My departure from the office was swift, a phantom in the pre-dawn gloom. I drove aimlessly for a time, letting the city lights blur into streaks, the familiar streets a comfort, then a trap. I needed to move to cross a line, both literal and figurative. My destination solidified in the quiet hum of the engine, the border crossing checkpoint at 2 a.m. It was a calculated risk, a place where eyes were everywhere, yet often looking for the wrong things. The checkpoint loomed, a constellation of harsh lights piercing the Inkai sky. My hands gripped the steering wheel, gripped tight. As I approached the first barrier, a sudden, blinding flash erupted from a nearby embankment. A shot. The passenger side window imploded, a spiderweb of shattered glass blooming inward. My head snapped back, the sharp sting of a superficial cut on my cheek. They weren't just watching, they were actively hunting. My foot slammed on the accelerator, swerving violently, the tires squealing in protest. Another shot whizzed past, embedding itself in the rear headrest. This wasn't a warning. This was an execution attempt. They had just sealed their own fate. I knew who to call. A ghost from my past, a digital phantom named the Weaver. An investigative journalist, known for unraveling corporate secrets and government cover-ups. Someone who operated in the same gray areas I now inhabited. Her number, long dormant, resurfaced in my memory. I found a secluded, overgrown cul-de-sac, killed the engine, made the call on the burner phone. User RH. His voice was a low rasp, laced with surprise and an underlying current of caution. I thought I was dead. Not yet, I replied, pressing a thumb to the cut on my cheek. But I'm close. I need my eyes, Weaver. Thorne, it goes deeper than anyone thinks. It connects to the one that buried me. Then a sigh. Meet me at the old industrial park, Sector 7, the abandoned server farm. 2 hours. Come alone and be careful. They're hunters and you've just become their prize. The alliance was uneasy, born of desperation and shared enemies. But it was an alliance nonetheless. Project Chimera wasn't just a device for targeted assassinations. It was a comprehensive system, a digital architecture designed to manipulate, control, and ultimately erase. Thorne hadn't just been working on a tech project. He had been building a weapon, and now I was standing in its crosshairs. The true scope of this conspiracy was only just beginning to unfurl, a terrifying tapestry woven from corporate greed, political ambition, and the digital threads of a phantom killer. My name, my past, my very life, now hung precariously in the balance. The Weaver's spectral voice, a memory etched in the frantic pulse of my thoughts, still echoed. Project Chimera, a comprehensive system, a digital architecture designed to manipulate. The implications of such a construct clawed at the edges of my resolve, a cold certainty settling in my gut. Not just a device for targeted demise, but a grand tapestry of control. I felt the weight of it, a leaden cloak upon my shoulders, as I stared at the screen, its pale luminescence casting stark shadows across the underground bunker's rough-hewn walls. My ally, the quiet, quick-fingered programmer, hunched over a console, fingers dancing across a holographic keyboard. Sweat beaded on their brow, reflecting the green glow of the data stream. Thorne's encrypted legacy, a digital fortress, slowly yielded its secrets. Each line of code that cracked open was a breath held, then released, into the stale air of our makeshift command center. The air thrummed with a nervous energy, the hum of servers a low, constant drone beneath the frantic click of keys. It's deeper than we thought, user RH, the programmer murmured, their voice strained, eyes never leaving the cascade of symbols. The architecture interlocks with several global financial platforms, major media conglomerates. Even, this wasn't merely corporate espionage, it was the sinews of a new world order, woven by unseen hands. I paced the small space, my boots scuffing on the concrete, the metallic tang of fear sharp in my mouth. It was all a prelude, a necessary culling to consolidate this unseen power. Keep pushing, I urged, my voice raspy. We need names, user RH, identities. The programmer worked with an almost surgical precision. Their focus absolute, a quiet defiance against the digital behemoth they sought to dismantle. Then a sharp intake of breath. The screen flickered, a final lock disengaged, and a new layer of data unfurled. The ones who commissioned Thorne, who funded Chimera. My eyes scanned the screen, the names, or rather the roles, emerging from the digital mist. The senator, a figurehead of legislative power, whose public persona was one of unwavering integrity. The industrialist, whose sprawling empire touched every facet of modern life, from energy to infrastructure. The media mogul, whose network spun the narratives of nations. A cabal indeed. These were not mere players, they were the game masters. My breath hitched. The weight of this revelation was crushing, a truth so monumental it threatened to shatter the fragile hope I'd clung to. Exposing them would not just clear my name, it would ignite a global inferno. This was the moment of difficult choices. My personal safety, already a ghost, was now to be utterly sacrificed. We need to get this out, I declared, the words feeling heavy, momentous. Every byte. Encrypt it again, fragment it, scatter it across dead drops, but we need an undeniable, irrefutable record. The programmer nodded, already moving, their fingers flying. It'll take time and a secure channel, a very secure channel. Time was a luxury we didn't possess. I thought of a name, a ghost from a past I had tried to bury. It was a card I had sworn never to play, a serpent I had kept caged. But he won't be easy to convince, and the exchange, it will come with a price. The programmer paused, looking up, their eyes wide with understanding. How do we find him? He has a rendezvous, I replied, my mind already picturing the desolate landscape, the biting wind. Always the same place, always the same time. A ghost in the machine, crossing borders no one else dares. The drive was a blur of moon-silvered highway and the gnawing anxiety in my gut. My old pickup, a relic of a life I no longer inhabited, groaned under the strain, its engine a rough counterpoint to the frantic rhythm of my heart. The evidence, compressed and triple encrypted onto a micro drive, felt like a burning coal in my pocket. The programmer was already working on disseminating copies through safer, slower channels, but this direct transfer, this dangerous gambit, was our best shot at immediate impact. The headlights cut through the inky blackness, revealing only the desolate stretch of road framed by skeletal trees. My past, a tapestry of mistakes and triumphs, stretched behind me, each thread pulling taut as I approached this precipice. I had risked my career, my reputation, my very soul, and now I was risking the lives of others. The thought was a bitter taste. Finally, the stark silhouette of the checkpoint emerged from the gloom. The stark, concrete barriers, the watchful cameras, the blinding glare of floodlights. It was a place designed for scrutiny, for control, for the meticulous sifting of humanity. But tonight, it was my gateway to a desperate gamble. I pulled the truck into a parking space well away from the main lanes, the tires crunching on loose gravel. The digital clock on the dashboard glowed a stark red. 0200. Precisely on time. The border crossing checkpoint at 2 a.m. There was a desolate place stripped of its daytime bustle. Only a skeletal crew of officials remained, their movements sluggish, their gazes dulled by the late hour. The wind howled, a mournful dirge rattling the loose panels of the truck. Tall, gaunt, wrapped in a heavy, nondescript coat, their face obscured by the upturned collar and a wide-brimmed hat. The courier. He moved with a silent grace, a phantom in the harsh light. His presence a ripple in the stillness. He stopped a few feet from my window, his eyes, glinting like polished obsidian, fixed on mine. There was no greeting, no pleasantry, power not in the way I usually understand it. It's about control, absolute. He considered this, his gaze unwavering. A gust of wind whipped past, carrying the scent of diesel and damp earth. What do I want me to carry? I pulled the microdrive from my pocket, its cold metal a small, dense weight. This, to a contact in a city far from here. Untraceable, undeniable, it exposes everything. He took the drive, his fingers surprisingly delicate. He didn't ask what was on it, a testament to his trade. His gaze flickered towards the checkpoint, towards the faint glow of the distant city beyond. The price, user RH, forever, and one last favor should I call upon it, no matter the risk. A slow smile, devoid of humor, stretched his lips. A dangerous bargain, but understand, user RH, I have awakened something. I had played my most dangerous card, leveraged a ghost, and the truth, now free, was a weapon forged in fire. The Cabal's identities were no longer a secret. The final pieces were gathered, but the hunt, I knew, had only just begun. The storm was coming, and I was standing directly in its path. The city, a sprawling beast of glass and concrete, slept uneasily beneath a sky bruised purple. For me, sleep was a forgotten luxury, a whisper from a life I'd long since shed. The information, a fragile, volatile truth delivered by a phantom, pulsed in my mind like a fresh wound. They were meeting. They were consolidating, preparing to dissolve into the night, their tendrils retracting from the city's throat. My contact, the one who'd first pulled me back into this dark current, had given me the final coordinates. A disused factory on the industrial fringe, a place where metal groaned and shadows clung like desperate spirits. The air grew heavy with the scent of rust and decay as my battered sedan grumbled its way down a forgotten service road. Headlights speared through the inky black, revealing skeletal remains of forgotten machinery, then the looming, corrugated iron shell of the factory. No lights showed, no sound escaped its gaping maw. Too quiet, always too quiet. This wasn't about clearing my name anymore. It was about stopping the rot before it consumed everything. I slipped through a broken window, the shards crunching under my boots, a symphony of destruction. Dust motes danced in the faint moonlight filtering through grimy skylights, illuminating a vast, cavernous space. Silhouettes moved in the distance, huddled around what looked like a makeshift command center, a folding table laden with monitors, wires snaking across the grimy floor. I recognized the lead conspirator, the corporate titan whose public face was one of philanthropy, his true visage now a mask of ruthless calculation. Beside him, the political fixer, his eyes darting, perpetually assessing threats. And then a figure I hadn't expected, standing slightly apart, observing. My old contact. Amplified by the cavernous space, I knew you wouldn't resist the urge to play the hero. His smile was a predator's baring its teeth. Such a predictable flaw. My contact stepped forward, a flicker of something unreadable in their eyes. We tried to warn you away, user RH. This was never your fight. It became my fight the moment you dragged me back into it. I retorted, my voice echoing, thin but laced with steel. And it became yours the moment you chose to stand with them. A sudden surge of movement. Enforcers, their faces impassive, their hands already moving towards their own concealed weapons. The political fixer barked an order, the data. Secure the primary drive, he knows too much. My eyes darted to the table, a small external drive glowing faintly with an indicator light. That was it, the proof. The architect of the tech CEO's demise, the web of illicit dealings, the names, the dates, the bank accounts, all of it. You won't get away with this, I snarled, a low growl escaping my throat. The corporate titan chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. We already have. The world is a malleable thing, user RH. We merely guide its shape. The enforcers advanced, their movements swift, practiced. I didn't wait. A flash of motion, a blur of fists and feet. I moved with the desperate grace of a cornered animal, years of training resurfacing, raw and brutal. A kick to the knee, a jab to the throat, a twist and a throw. One enforcer crumpled, gasping. The other charged, a heavy wrench swinging. I ducked, the metal whistling past my ear, and countered with an elbow to the jaw, followed by a swift, precise shot to the temple with the butt of my weapon. He dropped, a dead weight. My contact stood frozen, watching, their face a mask of conflicted emotions. The corporate titan and the political fixer, however, was scrambling, making for the exit, one grabbing the primary drive from the table. Don't let them leave, I yelled, a primal roar tearing from my chest. I lunged, a desperate sprint across the factory floor. The corporate titan was surprisingly fast, fueled by adrenaline and the fear of exposure. He fumbled with the drive, trying to secure it in an inner pocket. I tackled him, sending us both sprawling amidst discarded machinery. The drive skittered across the concrete, coming to rest near a pile of rusty gears. Fool, he hissed, clawing at my face, his manicured nails leaving shallow furrows. You'll die for this. I ignored the pain, my focus solely on the drive. My fingers closed around it, the plastic warm beneath my touch. A triumphant surge, short-lived. A sharp crack against the back of my head. Stars exploded in my vision. I staggered, dropping to one knee, the world tilting precariously. My contact stood over me, a length of pipe in their hand, their face etched with a terrible resolve. I'm sorry. User RH, I had no choice. The words were a physical blow, heavier than the pipe. I understood then. My contact wasn't just compromised, they were deeper in, a double agent playing both sides and now choosing the winning one. The Cabal's grip was far wider, far more insidious than I'd imagined. You always have a choice, I rasped, pushing through the throbbing pain, my vision blurring. Through the haze, I saw the corporate titan grin, a venomous triumph. Get rid of him and the drive. My contact hesitated, their gaze locking with mine, a flicker of genuine regret in their eyes, quickly extinguished. They raised the pipe again. This was it. The end. Another figure, lean and quick, moved with silent purpose, the ghost, the one who had fed me the truth. With a swift, brutal strike to the back of the head, my contact collapsed, the pipe clattering to the ground. Go, the ghost urged, his voice a low growl, pushing me towards a secondary exit. "I'll handle these." I didn't question, didn't argue. The drive was clutched in my hand, a burning ember of truth. I stumbled through the exit, the night air a shock against my skin, and ran towards the only place I knew the truth could be unleashed, the only place where the cabal's reach might falter. My sedan screamed protest as I pushed it to its limits, the engine whining, the tires spitting gravel. The digital clock on the dashboard glowed a stark, insistent red. 1:47 a.m., not much time. The destination was a desperate gamble, a place of convergence and departure, where lines blurred and authority was both absolute and easily circumvented. I drove like a man possessed, the city blurring past, until the stark, floodlit towers of the border crossing checkpoint at 2 a.m. loomed into view. A gauntlet of cameras, armed guards, and the ceaseless hum of generators. This was where the critical data needed to be transmitted, a beacon of truth sent across the digital chasm, beyond their reach. The air crackled with a different kind of tension here, a constant hum of suspicion and scrutiny. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from the raw, desperate need to finish this. I swerved into an abandoned lot adjacent to the checkpoint, killing the engine. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant rumble of trucks. My head throbbed, a dull, persistent ache. My hand, slick with sweat, fumbled for my mobile device. I had prepared this, a failsafe, a dead man's switch. A single touch and the encrypted data, now safely downloaded from the physical drive, would be broadcast. But as my thumb hovered over the transmit icon, a vehicle screeched to a halt beside mine. The political fixer, his face contorted with rage, emerged from the driver's side, a heavy pistol in his hand. "You truly are a stubborn fool, user RH." He raised the weapon, his finger tightening on the trigger. My own gun was still in the factory, a casualty of the chaos. My only option was instinct. I threw myself out of the car, rolling across the asphalt, the roar of the gunshot echoing in the night. A searing pain blossomed in my shoulder, a sudden, brutal bloom of agony. I gasped, clutching the wound, the hot blood seeping through my fingers. He advanced, his eyes gleaming with a predatory satisfaction. "This ends now." My vision swam, but my grip on the mobile device remained ironclad. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, I brought my other hand up, hitting the transmit button. The screen flashed, a single word appearing, "transmitting." A guttural cry of fury escaped the political fixer's lips as he realized. He fired again, but I was already falling, the world spiraling into a vortex of pain and fading light. The last thing I saw was the small, triumphant green light on my device signaling completion. The truth was out. My name might be cleared, but the man who once bore it was irrevocably broken. The world tilted, not from the Earth's spin, but from the brutal impact that had just rattled my skull. Yet through the haze, the single word on the mobile device's screen, "transmitting," burned with a fierce, vindicating light. A primal scream of thwarted rage tore from the political fixer's throat, a sound raw and desperate, like an animal caught in a snare. His eyes, molten with fury, locked onto mine, promising retribution that would never come. The air thrummed with the imminent arrival. Sirens, distant at first, then rapidly swelling into a cacophony, pierced the urban night. The fixer, a man whose carefully constructed facade had just shattered, lunged. But his movement was sluggish, fueled by spent adrenaline and despair. My body, a collection of protesting aches and throbbing wounds, responded instinctively. I rolled a clumsy, desperate maneuver, the mobile device still clutched in my hand like a lifeline. His fist, meant for my jaw, connected with the concrete, a sickening crunch echoing in the cramped space. Then a thunder of boots. The door, already ajar from our struggle, burst inward. Flashlights like predatory eyes swept the room, momentarily blinding me. "Freeze, police!" The voice, sharp and authoritative, was familiar. My old contact, the detective, stood silhouetted in the doorway, his face grim, his weapon raised. Behind him, a squad of officers fanned out, their movements precise, practiced. The fixer, now cornered, his breath heaving, offered no resistance. The fight had drained from him, replaced by a chilling resignation. He simply stood, a broken puppet, as the officers moved in, cuffing him with a metallic click that resonated with finality. My old contact's gaze found me, crumpled on the floor, the mobile device still clutched to my chest. He knelt, his voice softer now, laced with a weary relief. "User RH, you did it. The words were a balm, a quiet affirmation in the swirling chaos. I handed him the device, its battery light blinking low, but its mission accomplished. The data, raw and unvarnished, had been sent. It was a digital avalanche, a meticulously compiled dossier of greed and power, detailing the hidden network of corporate titans and political figures who had orchestrated the tech CEO's murder and countless other insidious acts. Shell companies, offshore accounts, blackmail operations, influence peddling, the entire festering ecosystem of their corruption was laid bare. The names, once whispered in shadowed corridors, would now be shouted in headlines. The ramifications were immediate. A seismic tremor through the city's highest echelons. Arrests followed swiftly, a domino effect beginning with the fixer and cascading upwards. The news channels, initially cautious, exploded with the story. The beloved tech CEO's death, once a perplexing tragedy, was now revealed as a calculated move in a larger, more sinister game. The threads I had painstakingly unraveled, the clues I had chased through alleyways and gilded offices, finally wove into a coherent, horrifying tapestry. My name, once synonymous with disgrace, began a slow, arduous climb back towards something resembling integrity. The public narrative, fueled by the leaked documents and official confirmations, shifted. I was no longer just the disgraced detective, but the one who, from the shadows, had brought down giants. Partially cleared, yes. The stain of my past wouldn't fully vanish, not yet, perhaps never. But the heavy cloak of shame had lifted, replaced by a lighter, if still weighty, mantle of reluctant heroism. Days later, the world felt quieter, though the lingering hum of scandal still vibrated through the airwaves. Trucks rumbled past, their engines a low growl, carrying their anonymous cargo into another jurisdiction, another life. I stood by my battered vehicle, watching the headlights pierce the inky blackness. My body ached with a dull, persistent throb, a constant reminder of the price paid. The broken ribs, the bruised ego, the scars that would fade but never truly disappear. But it wasn't just physical. The journey had carved new canyons in my soul. I had seen the true face of power, its monstrous indifference, its capacity for casual cruelty. The tech CEO, a ghost now, haunted my thoughts. His ambition, his fatal idealism, had been crushed under the wheels of a machine far older and more ruthless than he could have imagined. I had avenged him, yes, but at what cost? The world was not suddenly pristine. The roots of corruption ran deep, twisting through the very foundations of society. My reflection in the cold glass of the checkpoint booth showed a stranger. The lines around my eyes were deeper, etched with exhaustion and a new kind of knowing. My gaze, once haunted, now held a weary resolve. I was no longer the man who had lost everything, nor was I the man who had found redemption. I was something in between, a bridge between two worlds. Irrevocably changed. The future stretched before me, a vast, uncertain expanse. The private investigator's license was still valid, the phone still rang occasionally, but the work felt different now, imbued with a heavier purpose. The cynical shell remained, a necessary defense, but beneath it a quiet fire had been rekindled. I watched a car pass through the checkpoint, disappearing into the night, its taillights shrinking to pinpricks. The fight for justice, I mused, was never truly over. And I, user RH, would be there, watching, waiting, ready to step back into the fray.